From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
There's more than corn in the corn husker state. See what else Nebraska has to offer. It's today's Ag States of America. What's the secret to getting high yields? It may be listening to some tough talk from a top agronomist.
And I know people are not going to like me to hear that.
The advice to help you flip your soil as EPA announces its decision about E15 and the summer driving season.
Consumers want less expensive. It's higher octane fuel at a lower price.
What drivers and producers can expect right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The EPA is granting an emergency waiver this summer, extending the sale of E15. Now, the effort is hoped it will help keep prices lower at the pump. AgDay's Michelle Rook continues to track this. And Michelle, this is a big win for the ethanol industry.
Yes, for both the industry and consumers, Clinton. The temporary waivers will be issued every 20 days and exempt the 15% ethanol fuel blend from volatility requirements that would have blocked sales from June 1st to September 15th in much of the country. And they came just in the nick of time. Without the announcement prior to May 1st, terminal operators would have been forced to discontinue selling E15 in about 2/3 of the country during the busy summer driving season.
There's somewhere around 3,000 stations that sell it. In a lot of those stations, it's the best selling product they have. It's gone from being, it's their primary volume seller. So in the markets it's in, it's a huge amount.
Lamberty says for the consumer, it's a lower cost, low carbon alternative at the pump.
Wherever you see E15 sold, it's usually anywhere from around 15 or 5 to 15 cents less expensive than regular. And then consumers want less expensive. It's higher octane fuel at a lower price.
And he says that also puts downward pressure on other petroleum products. Lamberty says while this is good news, they need a permanent solution to provide certainty for retailers, and until then, it's limiting growth. Now, there is optimism growing for passage of an E15 bill, though, with the American Petroleum Institute now endorsing it.
All right, thanks, Michelle. California is now the first state in the country to pass emission standards regarding locomotives. The state's Air Resources Board saying the new standards apply to all switch passenger, industrial, and freight line haul trains. Any locomotive older than 23 years will not be allowed to operate beginning in 2030. Now, the board estimates this could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by nearly 22 million metric tons. The same board also voting to ban sales of new diesel big rigs by the year 2036 and require all trucks to be zero emissions by the year 2042. Something else that can increase emissions, wildfires and burning, but a new tool may make a difference. The Southern Nevada District Fire and Aviation Division successfully testing a specially designed mobile incinerator. They burned wood debris at Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area. The incinerator's high-velocity air curtain design traps smoke particles and reduces emissions over 90%. Firefighters said smoke wasn't at all visible during the test, only heat waves, and they say this will offer another way to meet local smoke management requirements in southern Nevada. Mexican officials are criticizing a U.S. request for consultations regarding its pending GMO policy. A top Mexican official calling the request an unacceptable violation of Mexican law and feeds the interest of seed oligopolies. He also reiterated the Mexican stance that a ban on imports of GMO corn for food use does not affect U.S. corn producers in any way. One corn farmer we spoke with disagrees and says Mexico's president is violating USMCA.
He's the one that signed the agreement of using GMO products, and now he's the one that is going against his own signature.
Now, the Biden administration has argued even limiting the ban on imports to GMO corn for food use is not a science-based decision. Melting snows continuing to cause problems on the Mississippi River. USDA now saying all barge traffic will be halted along the upper portion of the river for weeks. The agency's grain transportation report showing all locks and dams above the lock near New Boston, Illinois, will be closed for 3 weeks due to flooding. And experts warn high waters could also shut down river traffic as far as the lock near Hannibal, Missouri, starting later this week. Now, this means restricted barge traffic will slow grain movement down the river and fertilizer movement up from the Gulf. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says the Mississippi will crest at La Crosse, Wisconsin at nearly 4 feet above flood stage. That's the third highest water level on record.
As we see that water working its way further south, it'll be a top 10 flood crest, at least to the Quad Cities over the next week or two. But again, a lot of that's due to snowmelt. A lot of it's working its way through the system. And we've got a diminishing flood threat as we head into May.
But the situation is quite different in the southern plains. That area seeing desperately needed rain last week. But is it enough to save the winter wheat crop, especially in Kansas, the top winter wheat producing state, where at last report more than 60% of the crop was in poor to very poor condition? Portions of the state seeing slightly more than 2 inches of rain, the most many have seen in more than a year.
Well, it definitely will help out the better stands, but there's way too many fields that are in that poor to very poor condition in Kansas. It's like 60%. So it's going to take a lot to bring that crop back. If we could keep things cool and keep the moisture coming on a more regular basis, that would help that hard red winter wheat crop out in Kansas. But I don't really think that that's in the forecast for us right now.
So will the southern plains see more moisture this week? Meteorologist Andrew Whitmire has the very latest. Andrew.
Yeah, and this is the million-dollar question here. Can we get enough moisture here across the southern plains? And outside of a few very spotty hit-and-miss showers, it doesn't look like much. And as we take a look at the precipitation outlook here for at least the first full week here of May, well, we're not going to see much relief across the plain states. In fact, even the northern plains looking likely to really start to dry on out. Let's take a look at your crop photo here of the day. Erica Pence of Lomax, Illinois, sharing a picture of a little boy they hope will be a third-generation farmer. I'll have more on your Ag Day forecast in just a few.
Flip Your Soil on Ag Day is brought to you by Economics. Economics is the go-to resource to keep your soil and bottom line as healthy as possible. Access one-of-a-kind tools, research, and agronomy content at nutrien-economics.com.
As farmers are heading to the fields to plant this season, we're looking at ways to improve the productivity of their soils to achieve those higher yields. Today, we kick off our Flip Your Soil series looking at proper drainage. Farm Journal field agronomist Ken Ferry says one of the quickest ways to improve soil health is to install drainage tile. Now, he says for farmers with fields that have improper drainage, excess water can limit oxygen and anaerobic activity.
So when we move into a farm and we drain it and bring oxygen into that field and get oxygen deeper in the soil, we see it starting to bring it alive from a biology standpoint. And once we bring it alive, then you see it show up in yield as well.
Ferry says in high-yielding environments, proper drainage in a field is as, if not more important than planting cover crops when it comes to improving soil health.
And I know people are not going to like me to hear that, but I've seen it. And you see that productivity come back. Areas of the farm that couldn't hardly grow weeds because of the water situation, now growing 200 bushel corn and 80 bushel beans. That's soil health.
Now tomorrow we'll look at how farmers can improve water infiltration in their soils. It was a mixed bag as commodity traders wrapped up the month of April. We'll see where things stand as May begins. Coming up next. And later, Nebraska agriculture is about so much more than cows and corn. We'll get a tour as the Ag States of America rolls on. A seriously mixed day to end April, and it follows an ugly week of trade for grain markets. Michelle Rook joins us from the field with weather that could change as May begins.
Joining us with market analysis here from the field this morning is Chuck Shelby with Risk Management Commodities. And Chuck, let's talk a little bit about planting and spring rallies. Are we going to get our typical spring rally that we normally see in the grains?
Well, we've had our normal decline after it's all planted, so we're kind of backwards. But I think, we've gone down a lot here. I think eventually we run out of sellers, and then we get back to the fundamentals of, so far planting progress is on pace, but those northern states are going to be the ultimate answer to what this market can really, take off and recover and find a level that this market can rally back from.
So when the market finally bottoms, do we get a quick recovery, or how much of a recovery do you think we see normally in a spring rally?
I think it's going to be a slower process. once you have these big breaks, the market takes a little bit of time to stabilize, get some confidence or some profit takers of those who have sold the market. So I think it's going to be a slow rally unless we get to a point and planting progress is really, really slow.
So how many guys have done some new crop marketing, and are they going to get an opportunity for better prices or not?
I think guys have sold some, but probably not as aggressive as they wanted to be. Most of the time producers wait to see, they get their crop in the ground and they have an opportunity to do it. So I think guys are probably a little surprised by the magnitude of the break and probably behind on their marketing.
So what is your recommendation at this point with those new crop bushels?
I think you got to wait and look for recoveries, and at that point you can make some sales. One strategy might be make the sales and have some call options in case there's a reason down the road the yield's not there, acres are not there. So looking for opportunities for the market to come back and then make some sales.
All right, well, thanks for joining us. Have a great planting season. That is Chuck Shelby with Risk Management Commodities. Our full analysis at agweb.com, and we'll have more AgDay coming up.
May 1st, talking about snow here. Up across parts of the upper peninsula here in Michigan, northern Wisconsin, tapping into some of that as well, where we could be looking at, again, some several inches of snow as we're still dealing with this cutoff low here across the Great Lakes states, and that will begin to eventually work its way out of here as we head onto the mid portion of the week. But we are still watching this blocking pattern here, this omega block pattern that's likely going to set up out across the plain states and western half of the U.S. This will heat things up, keep things drier here for the western half of the country. Meanwhile, we'll still be looking at cooler weather, likely for the Great Lakes, parts of the Midwest and New England coastline here as we go throughout this first full week here of May. Let's widen out the precipitation map, and again you can see where we are dealing with that trough and where we're dealing with that blocking pattern out west. Not a whole lot of moisture chances. We go east of the plains though, and that's where the moisture will be centered again, where we could be looking at several more inches of water here as we go throughout this first full week here of May. And looking at the outlook here for precipitation, you can see that the browns here, the drier weather, going to center again where that blocking pattern is going to begin to start to shake on up here. And as we take a look at that root zone map, where you see some of those darker reds up and down the plain states, that's again where we need lots of moisture. And unfortunately, Mother Nature is going to have other plans here as we go throughout at least the first half here of May. Temperature outlook, you'll notice that it'll be cooler there across the eastern half of the U.S., warmer out west where that blocking pattern will set up. Let's take a look at your AgDay select cities, or at least your temperatures for today. 49 into Chicago, 69 down in Atlanta. You can definitely tell where that cutoff low is centered up around the Great Lakes, where those temperatures are into the 40s and 50s. Check out Salt Lake City though, 84 degrees. Let's look around the country. Let's take a look at your AgDay select cities. Going over to Ironwood, upper peninsula there of Michigan, off and on snow showers, high 37 degrees. Going over to Northern Virginia, mostly cloudy, 70 degrees. And going over to Great Falls, Montana, heating up, highs in the lower 70s.
Machinery Pete is turning over the latest data on high-speed discs. We'll have that next. And later, tour the Ag States of America and discover the Cornhusker State is about more than maize in the country.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
For farmers in the field this spring, Machinery Pete is turning over the recent pricing trends for high-speed discs.
Well, folks, everything these days seems to be bigger and faster. That's just the world we live in, and obviously no difference when it comes to the world of farm equipment. Last few years I've seen tremendous buyer interest in high-speed planters as they help us get the seed in the ground faster and better. And I'm also here to report we're seeing tremendous interest in high-speed tillage tools, discs in particular. Now I could tell you over my 33 and a half years tracking auction prices, over 25,000 sale prices on discs we've typed into MachineryPete.com. And just in the past couple months, we've seen the 3 highest auction prices ever on discs. So let's go back to November 16th farm auction in Emory, South Dakota, where this 2021 model John Deere 2680H high-speed disc sold for $141,000, and that is the all-time record high price right there, folks. Now the next month, December 19th, our friends at Big Iron had a sale in Laurel, Nebraska, where this 2021 Kinsey Mocktail 302 high-speed disc went for $116,250. And more recently, just on an April 20th sale in Allegan, Michigan, this Degelman ProTill 36 sold for $140,000. So those are the three highest auction prices ever on discs. And no, if you'd have told a young machinery Pete 33 years ago, young man, someday you'll see a disc sell for $141,000 at auction, I wouldn't have believed it.
All right, thanks, Pete. Well, Nebraska is known as the Cornhusker State, but it's about more than corn and cattle. Take a tour of the Ag States of America next.
In the Country on Ag Day is brought to you by Pivot Bio. What if you had the nitrogen you need already on seed? Pivot Bio is the first company to apply nitrogen on seed. The nitrogen you need, now on seed, from Pivot Bio. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Where would agriculture be without the great state of Nebraska? Charlie Behrens takes us to the Cornhusker State in this edition of Ag States of America, where we learn it's about much more than corn.
Now, aside from being the mascot for the University of Nebraska, the term Cornhusker comes from, as you might be able to guess, husking corn. And from there, it's safe to assume that Nebraska grows a lot of corn. Now, if you're thinking corn, boring, let me remind you that aside from your cornflakes and your corn on the cob, corn is responsible for oil, syrup, starch, fuel, and most importantly, whiskey. Nebraska is third in the nation for corn production, turning out 1.6 billion bushels of corn each year. But I bet you didn't know that a good majority of that corn actually stays in state to help feed the cattle. That's right, Nebraska's cattle get to have their corn and eat it too. Now, agriculture is Nebraska's largest industry, with the cattle business powering the economy. And that's what we call a cash cow. In fact, the state supports 19,000 cattle ranches where the cows start off on a grass-fed diet before heading to the feedlots to put on a corn-based diet. Then all you have to do is subtract the fed, add some bread, and you got a corned beef sandwich. Don't forget the pickle. Beyond cattle, farmers also raise hogs, turkeys, and chickens. They produce eggs, dairy products, and about 460,000 pounds of wool. And thank you for that, Nebraska, because what would a Midwest winter be like without wool? Not warm. So 92% of Nebraska's total land is used for agriculture. However, the most valuable resource for the state's farmers is not what's on the land, but what lies beneath it. Aquifers. And that is exactly why you don't judge a state by its corn. And for those of you still saying, aqua what? Aquifers are large, permeable bodies of rock under the Earth's surface that hold groundwater. These aquifers then allow pivot irrigation systems to deliver water to crops in an otherwise challenging climate. Having a ready source of water helps farmers avoid crop loss due to drought. Now you might be thinking, okay, sounds cool, but how much water is that anyway? Well, there's so much water under Nebraska that if it was above ground, it would have a depth of almost 38 feet. So in scientific terms, that's a lot of water. The water from the Ogallala Aquifer and the Platte River are an amazing resource, and farming in Nebraska would not be the same without them. Beyond corn, soybeans, and sorghum, Nebraska also grows hay in every single county. And in the western part of the state, you can find millet, sunflowers, wheat, and dry edible beans. Nebraska is actually the nation's leader in growing the Great Northern Bean. The Great Northern Beans are very popular throughout North America. But despite their popularity, I guess a bunch of you would never realize you've even eaten them. But they are added to soups and stews and casseroles or hot dish if you're in Minnesota. Now beyond this tough Cornhusker persona, Nebraska actually has a sweet side. Take sugar beets, for example. Farmers have been successfully producing sugar beets in western Nebraska for well over 100 years, thanks to the arid climate, altitude, and the ability to irrigate. Sugar beets thrive on long days with sunshine and cool nights in the western part of Nebraska.
And you can see more of these state-by-state features with Charlie over at pivotbio.com/originals. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Hope you all have a great week out in farm country.
Closed captioning on Ag Day is brought to you by BASF, helping you do the biggest job on earth.